What happens when the very place that's supposed to heal, uplift, and show grace turns into a stage for public humiliation? That's exactly what happened inside a Texas church when a pastor shocked his entire congregation by rebuking a singer in front of everyone. The embarrassment was so raw, the crowd couldn't believe their eyes. But here's where the story takes an even wilder turn. Gospel legend Marvin Sapp himself stepped in, and what he said next has the entire faith community buzzing, divided, and questioning everything they thought they knew about church leadership. Trust me, you do not want to miss this. Church scandals are nothing new, but what just happened in Texas has taken things to an entirely different level. During a live service, a pastor publicly humiliated a singer right in front of the entire congregation. The shocking moment was caught on camera and quickly went viral, flooding social media with debates about respect, leadership, and humility in the church. But here's where the story takes a powerful turn. Gospel icon Marvin Sapp, yes, the same legend behind Never, would have made it decided he could no longer remain silent. With decades of influence and authority in the gospel world, his public response has set the church community on fire. Some are applauding him for speaking truth, while others say he went too far. In this video, we're breaking down exactly what went down inside that Texas church, why Marvin Sapp chose to step in, and how his bold words have sparked a nationwide conversation about church culture, pride, and accountability in leadership. We'll walk you through the full timeline, the reactions from church members and online voices, and Marvin Sapp's statement that has everyone talking. Stick around until the very end, because what started as one pastor calling out a singer has now exposed bigger issues the church has been avoiding for years. It concerns the condition of the contemporary church, the exercise of power by leaders, and the thin line separating humiliation from discipline. And I promise you that what we find will cause you to wonder if this was truly about fixing a mistake or if it was more about ego and power. We must begin at the beginning of this narrative in order to completely comprehend the indignation that has surrounded it. The Sunday service was the pivotal event. It was meant to be a normal church service. The sanctuary was packed. On stage was the praise squad. The assembly was prepared for a morning of singing, prayer, and the preached word, much like a lot of churches in America. However, what transpired that day left individuals in shock, embarrassment, and bewilderment rather than togetherness and inspiration. During the service, a young vocalist was asked to minister in song. This person, by all accounts, was talented and passionate. They started singing because they were eager to share their gift with the church family. They gave their all during the concert, engaging the audience and providing what should have been an inspirational moment. But the pastor cut in abruptly. The pastor halted the music in the middle of the performance, according to witnesses and the widely shared viral video. He addressed the artist directly and gave what many referred to as a public reprimand. The pastor publicly reprimanded the person, pointing out what he said were errors, blunders, or even spiritual failings, rather than gently correcting them or removing them in private. The congregation went quiet. Others shuffled uneasily in their seats, while others gasped. Some of them even left. It had become a public spectacle instead of an uplifting church session. As the pastor's remarks reverberated through the microphone, the artist was seen on social media, standing there plainly shaken, eyes down, body rigid, and unsure of how to react. Whispers swiftly circulated around the rows as members of the praise team appeared surprised. The question for many who viewed the video online was not whether the singer had erred. The preacher handled it that way. They maintained that public humiliation is not appropriate in God's house. After all, a leader's job is to lead, support, and correct in a loving manner, not to destroy in front of hundreds of people. Videos of the incident were posted on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok within hours. The captions were harsh. Church petty. People abandon the church for this reason. Furthermore, shame is not a kind of discipline. Numerous comments, numbering in the thousands, denounced the pastor's behavior. Some defended him by arguing that religious leaders had a duty to maintain standards. However, the prevailing tone was one of indignation and disgust at the brutal public treatment of someone's gift and dignity. And that's when things started to get out of hand, because there were other voices besides that of social media users and churchgoers. Leading voices in the gospel community began to voice their opinions, posing difficult queries regarding accountability, leadership, and if pastors are going too far in handling matters in this manner. However, one voice stood out above the cacophony. and nobody was able to ignore that voice. Gospel icon Marvin Sapp witnessed the events and had a stirring statement to make. The video of the Texas pastor publicly scolding the musician was already making waves on the internet when it initially went viral. However, the response from one of the greatest icons of gospel music, Marvin Sapp, was what really made the incident a national discussion within the religious world. Marvin Sapp is more than just a well-known gospel artist. He is a symbol of culture. In churches, radio stations, and even the general public, his song Never Would Have Made It became an anthem of optimism. In addition to being a recording artist and a pastor, he is a well-respected leader whose impact extends well beyond music. Therefore, the church community pays attention when someone of his caliber talks. Sapp didn't hesitate. He addressed the Texas event as well as the greater church culture of humiliation in his reaction, which went viral on Facebook and Instagram. His remarks were convincing, straightforward, and unambiguous. He emphasized that public rebuke should never be the first option, even though correction is occasionally required. Even when giving criticism, a pastor's job is to uplift others, not to bring them down in public. According to Sapp, he stated in part that it is the biblical duty of leaders to repair in love rather than to degrade. Since public humiliation causes pain rather than growth, he underlined that correction should, if feasible, take place in private. Many people who felt silenced or embarrassed in the name of discipline found that his remarks brought up terrible memories of similar treatment they had endured in their own churches. However, the personal touch of Sapp's reaction was what really made it stand out. His own decades of experience guiding congregations and coaching aspiring singers and musicians served as a source of inspiration. He clarified that in his experience as a leader, he has witnessed innumerable instances where someone faltered or struggled on stage. However, his role at the time was not to make them look bad. It served as a guidance. He maintained that this is how real leaders function. Marvin Sapp's remarks quickly gained widespread attention. Social media users shared screenshots of his reaction with comments such as, "Thank you, Marvin, for expressing what needed to be expressed." And, "This is why he's respected as both an artist and a pastor," he wrote. Gospel singers, choir directors, and even regular churchgoers flooded his posts with support. But not everyone agreed. Some pastors and leaders retaliated, claiming that Marvin Sapp was undermining the authority of the pulpit by publicly criticizing another pastor. This triggered a new wave of debate. Was Marvin Sapp stepping out of line by calling out another leader, or was he defending the dignity of artists? The tension revealed a deeper problem in church culture. They insisted that public correction is sometimes necessary to maintain order in the church, especially when worship standards are being compromised. Pastors have been regarded as infallible voices in their churches for generations, but in the age of social media and openness, that dynamic is being called into question. Marvin Sapp's response put him squarely in the middle of this conflict, and while his words offered consolation to many, they also raised a more serious issue. Before we get into that more significant question, let's take a moment to examine how the public reacted, including not only online fans, but also other gospel artists, church leaders, and even those who don't usually watch church drama. If gospel legends are now taking action to expose petty church behavior, what does that say about the state of the modern church? If Marvin Sapp's response stoked a fire, the public's response stoked a full-fledged blaze. Their voices amplified this story in ways that ABC, YouTube, and church leadership circles could not ignore, and the incident and his remarks became the subject of intense discussions on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube in addition to within church circles. One side was indignant, with thousands of churchgoers, gospel fans, and even those who acknowledged they hadn't attended church in years expressing their displeasure and anger at the Texas pastor's handling of the situation. For many, the viral video wasn't just about one singer, which is what made the reaction so potent. Comments like, "This happened to me as a teenager in church," poured in, as it brought back memories of personal trauma. "I didn't sing again. Young folks are leaving because of this. They leave with trauma after coming for love. Celebrate in public, correct in private." Leadership is that. In the process of creating the film, TikTok producers shared personal accounts of being humiliated by leaders in front of a crowd. As more people became aware of the long-term harm that public humiliation causes, some videos received hundreds of thousands of views. A culture of pride and power dynamics in many churches swiftly became reflected in what began as a single local church scandal. Not everyone, however, was incensed. A more vociferous but smaller set of respondents supported the Texas pastor's choice. They contended that real-time correction is occasionally necessary to preserve the spirit of excellence in worship. They believed that since the service was about praising God rather than performing, the singer's error, whether it was missing a note, deviating from the designated song, or displaying a lack of preparation, deserved a public response. This dispute demonstrated how deeply divided church culture is when it comes to leadership styles. One pastor said online, "Sometimes correction stings, but it's necessary. If you can't handle it, maybe the pulpit isn't for you." Some adhere to conventional authoritarian paradigms in which pastors are revered as spiritual fathers without challenge. Some support a new compassionate leadership approach that puts emotional health ahead of public discipline. Choir directors and gospel musicians also contributed their voices. Some backed Marvin Sapp, claiming that they had witnessed far too many young musicians give up music completely due to embarrassing religious experiences. Others subtly supported the pastor, pointing out that accountability, even if it's public, comes with a job, and that gospel music has always had high standards. It's interesting to note that this dispute extended beyond religious culture. On websites like YouTube and Twitter, secular observers started analyzing the incident as an illustration of power abuse and poisonous leadership. It had nothing to do with theology for them, because it dealt with human dignity. The story's resonance was considerably wider. The story of its expansion was conveyed by the hashtags. Young users who were making fun of the pastor's actions trended #UrchPetty. Musicians who supported the notion that artists should be treated with respect used # stands with singers. Fans applauded his bravery in addressing a topic that many had been too scared to bring up, and a Marvin Sapp was trending. Churchgoers have even started tagging their own leaders, demanding accountability and challenging the idea that public reprimand had a place in worship. All of a sudden, this was more than a Texas problem. It sparked discussions in Sunday schools, Bible studies, and choir rehearsals across the country. However, Marvin Sapp's own group had the most unexpected response. He was apparently privately warned by several of his pastoral peers that he had exposed himself to criticism by becoming involved in the matter. However, the very positive response from artists and fans indicated otherwise. People were waiting for someone with his level of authority to point out what they perceived as a dysfunctional church culture. Nevertheless, one question kept coming up under all the arguments. Why do so many leaders prefer public humiliation than one-on-one counseling? And it's the query that brings us to the more serious problem, the true implications of this tragedy for the condition of contemporary church leadership. Although the shock factor of the Texas church incident originally garnered notice, the discussion it generated goes much beyond a single rebuke. Fundamentally, this dispute has brought to light long-standing conflicts among contemporary church leadership and the changing expectations of congregations. Pastors are seen as spiritual leaders whose word is rarely questioned in the hierarchical structures that have historically governed churches. Public correction was frequently regarded in these models as a valid means of upholding the sanctity of worship, enforcing standards, and preserving order. Congregations unquestioningly accepted this dynamic for decades. But things are evolving. Churchgoers today look on their leaders for transparency, accountability, and compassion. Social media's emergence has given voice to previously unheard voices, enabling ministry personnel, musicians, and congregants to share their experiences with a wider audience. Even when used as a form of discipline, humiliation is coming under more and more scrutiny. Additionally, when a public reprimand, like the one in Texas, gains widespread attention, it stops being an isolated episode and instead reflects larger problems with leadership. Theologians and experts agree that there is a thin line between abuse from discipline. When used with compassion and in private, discipline can lead, correct, and develop. On the other side, embarrassment damages confidence, instills dread, and may even cause gifted people to completely leave the ministry. In this regard, the Texas episode serves as a reminder of the perils of ego-driven leadership. The participation of Marvin Sapp highlights yet another important point. Church culture can be shaped by powerful voices. In addition to standing up for the artist, SAP's public response to the situation sent a message to church leaders worldwide. the ability to foster development and preserve dignity are more important indicators of leadership than the capacity to instill terror. Differences between generations within the church are also revealed by the argument. Younger members are much less accepting of public humiliation, especially millennials and Gen Z members. They place a high importance on emotional intelligence, inclusion, and respect. Older members of the congregation may continue to follow conventional authority models because they think that stern discipline maintains holiness and order. This conflict of expectations is igniting more general conversations about how churches should strike a balance between compassion, accountability, and reverence. The function of gospel music in church culture is another aspect of the dispute. Musicians and singers are more than just entertainers. They serve as ministers. Their art spreads messages of worship, faith, and hope. A singer's confidence and the congregation's spiritual experience might both be damaged by publicly humiliating them. There are important questions raised by this incident. How can leaders uphold standards while providing assistance to ministry employees? How can they make corrections without taking away from God's gifts? And without sacrificing its core values, how can church leadership change to satisfy the demands of contemporary congregations? This discussion has increased because to social media, millions of people have viewed videos, excerpts, and commentary, sparking discussions in formerly private areas, pastoral training programs, choir rehearsals, and Bible study groups. This incident's viral nature guarantees that its lessons will be researched and discussed for months, if not years. This is the startling aspect that many people may not be aware of. These kinds of incidents are more frequent than most members of the congregation realize. Periodically, there are rumors of public humiliation and reprimand, but they are rarely as well known as this one until someone like Marvin Sapp spreads the word. His intervention has compelled churches all around the country to confront difficult issues of accountability, leadership style, and the fine line between compassion and correction. It becomes even more intriguing at this point. Many church leaders are apparently re-evaluating their procedures for resolving missteps, particularly in public service. As the arguments continue, to avoid situations like the Texas rebuke, some are putting in place new pastoral training, mentorship programs, and private feedback routes. This one event is having far-reaching consequences that are influencing church leadership and ministry culture in ways no one could have foreseen.